Hey, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to prepare for how to actually run the user interview. Okay. Um, so preparing is a big part of everything that you do, but this especially needs some preparation. Okay. So there's two key things that you want to hone in on in this conversation. One is developing the persona, which has everything to do with context and jobs to be done, right? So understanding the contextual problem in that jobs to be done framework starts with understanding the context of the person that you're talking to, right? So in persona development, you're really capturing the context, some of the higher level, bigger picture things. In problem statement development, in those questions, you want to get to the specifics of the product that you are concerned with. Okay. So these are some questions that I jotted down for my own preparation with Figma users. Okay, so we'll just run through them. For persona development, I ask how long have you been a designer? I want to know if they're new, if they're experienced. The longer they've been in design, the more likely they've used other products. So then I know I can probably ask those comparative questions. Do you work for a company, a freelance? Are you freelancer? Or you work for an agency? This really gets to some more contextual things that some assumptions and hypotheses I have in my head about different markets that we could target for certain features, right? So if there's commonalities among freelancers versus agency workers, having that contextual information in these interviews, I can give that to our marketing team so we know who specifically we're targeting. And that's really what persona development is about, is knowing your audience and knowing the right things to put in front of that audience. Okay, so I come at product a lot with a very market driven um, mentality, and there's a lot of really senior PMs and PM leaders who agree that having a strong marketing competency helps. So if you're looking for any advice on other areas of your skill set to sharpen, the marketing mix, positioning, pricing, value proposition, the four P's, right? It's, um, pricing, positioning, product, and place. So place is like, where do you sell your product? And then product is what we're talking about today. But the other two pieces are like really traditional marketing pieces in positioning and pricing, and positioning probably being the biggest one. And you can't understand how to position your product unless you have the context of who you're talking to and what they care about. So long-winded way to explain that. I apologize. Moving on, what do you primarily use design software for? This gets, without asking what features that they use, because that could be a really general question, right? What features do you use? But asking them what they use it for brings it up a level of abstraction, right? So are they using it for mobile apps? Are they designing physical products? Are they doing web-based stuff? Like, generally, why do you care about Figma and what do you use it for? It's helpful to know, right? Gives you that added context that you wouldn't have otherwise. Which tools do you use? Do you use different ones for different reasons? So this is a question that I put in here if I don't know whether or not they use Figma. If they're just a designer and I'm talking to them, I want to know generally what tools do you use. If I know that they're a Figma user, I might ask something like, what tools do you use outside of Figma and why? Because that could be really telling too, as far as what's missing from Figma, uh, right? If you can be, going back to their mission and vision, right? They want to be the go-to place. So if they're having to go to other places, that's not winning, right? In the definition of Figma. So it's a great question to ask. Okay, so moving on to problem statement development. Now that we have kind of the context of that user, we can develop a pretty solid persona of who they are, right? And going back to marketing, one last comment on personas is a lot of times in marketing, people will say, oh, okay, so my persona is this 26-year-old female who's, whatever ethnicity and affluent, and these are their hobbies. that may be useful for like Facebook advertising information, right? If you're going to do targeted ads, but chances are there's a lot more people who have the same problem that you're trying to solve than a 26-year-old, whatever female with whatever income, right? So to me, those personas aren't very valuable. What makes a good persona is the context of the problem and what their problem is and why they have it. Like, what are they trying to achieve, and what can they not achieve because you don't make it possible for them to achieve it, right? So and we'll get into persona development and actually create some personas later, but that's a definite point of clarity that you need to have in terms of traditional personas and product-led personas. Okay, problem statement development. So, I put if applicable here. So if somebody, going back to the how long have you been a designer, what tools do you use? If somebody was using Sketch before or Adobe XD and now they're using Figma, I'll ask, why did you switch from Adobe XD to Figma? That's really telling, and probably something we should let marketing know about too. Because the reason that they switched is probably why other people would switch if they knew. If they switched away from Figma, that's just as insightful, but not for marketing, more for product purposes, right? So finding people who have left Figma to go to other products are really good people to interview to identify those problems that are so big that they left for another product that solved the problem better. Okay, that's why I put it number one. So what's the best part of Figma or whatever the current product is that they're using? What's the worst part about it? This really helps understand, like, what are the key differentiators for the product? What are the things that they love? What's the worst part about it? If it's a competitive product, this gives you insights on how to position your product, but it also gives you insights on problems that aren't being solved well by your competitors, which gives you an opportunity to go solve that problem better, right? And then what's the worst part about it? If it's Figma, it's like, okay, this gives you a really good insight into what you can fix that you have control of. Yeah, so those questions are important and probably something you can ask of any product or competitive product. Number four, if you could wave a magic wand and fix, change, or add anything to it, what would that be? I like this open-ended question with a magic wand, because magic, you can do anything with it. And it's nice to get the user later on in this interview thinking really out of the box here. They don't feel constrained by, oh, I don't think this is possible, because they have a magic wand. Anything's possible, right? Like, okay. So, and then how much would that be worth to you? I like to add this in because then you get to really differentiate between, is this a nice to have, or is this something that would really move the needle for the user? And then you, as the product person, along with your development team, can figure out, is this low-hanging fruit that could create immense value or not? And what I love about these user interviews, these are called generative user interviews. These give you insights that you didn't have before, okay? And as someone who's not a current PM of these products, this is the exact kind of interview you should be doing. What ends up happening is that the answers you get lead you to other user interviews, right? So if the wave the magic wand question led you to something really cool, you might want to follow up and see how many other people have this problem, right? For instance, you'll see later, one of the problems I discovered for Figma was that people are having to use outside products for certain things. I won't completely spoil it, but Figma doesn't have a complete feature set in a certain area, and people are having to use other products to supplement what Figma doesn't have, right? And so by waving a magic wand, they said, hey, yeah, Figma would have all of this and I could leave that product at the door. And it's like, huh, cool. I wonder, and that led me to a whole bunch of other questions, which, we'll get into that. But there is going to be a bit of a drill down effort into getting into the specifics of what is the right thing to build for the user. Okay, so we'll get into the nitty gritty here soon enough, but let's finish prepping for this interview before we worry about follow-up interviews. So this isn't a list of questions that you should copy and paste, but hopefully this gives you a good idea of what you need to be looking for in these generative interviews, right? What are questions that you need to be asking to understand the context of the user, like the first four? And then what are specific problems about the product of interest or competitive products of interest? And these are really trying to give you insights on opportunity areas to either solve problems or introduce something new to help you win in some area of the market, or be able to position yourself better against current competitors. So that's how I use generative user interviews. I'm by no means a professional user interviewer, but just like that survey showed, which is kind of a form of quantitative analysis, a relatively small sample size, but uh, decent enough, right? You get a good idea of how important user interviewing is to your product practice, and having this skill will set you apart from all the others who believe, like um, that one gentleman did with Marty Kagan, that this is not your job, when in fact you will find out that it's very much part of your job. So with that, good luck in creating your interview guide, because next we're gonna talk about how to actually run the interview, some things to make sure you do and some things to make sure you don't do. And with that, we'll jump right into it. See you in the next video.